Hi. I read recently that Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, has been buying shares of Alibaba, the famous Chinese online marketplace. And, said the article, Munger sees the stock as better than cash. So cheap it is. Alibaba. As far as I could remember, its boss, Jack Ma, has 2 years ago been disappeared by Xi Jinping because Mr. Ma did not cave in to the Chinese government dictates. Still, because Charlie Munger has been buying, I took a quick look at the stock. The symbol is BABA. My first question was, as always, how good is the company? As I explained here a few months ago, my private method is to sum up the return on equity, the gross margins, and the sales growth in percentages to get the company's greatness indicator, or CGI as I call it. The ROE shows how good is the business, the gross margin shows how good is management, and the sales growth shows how fast the market is growing. The higher the sum of all three, the better the company. And what do you know? Alibaba's sum was indicating a clearly superior company. But what about the stock's greatness? That is, how cheap is it? For this, I divided the CGI number by the stock's EV to EBITDA, which in this case is a ridiculous 1.9 times. I got a ratio of more than 10. Wow! I could see now why Munger is interested. So, since he probably has done his due diligence, should I be buying too? Not so fast. I never buy on someone else's work. I always do my own. But here my problem was threefold. First, I can't do any due diligence in China. I cannot speak Chinese. I can't travel there because of COVID and quarantine. But worst, China is the kind of country I'd never, ever invest in because it breaks all my three iron-clad rules of investing in a foreign country. All of them. I already outlined these rules once in one of my first videos, but here they are again in brief. Rule number one, in the foreign country where I consider investing, I must be able to run down the capital's main avenue and carry a sign saying the president of the country is an idiot, and the police would not arrest me. Rule number two, not only the police would not arrest me, but it would also protect me from angry citizens who like the presidents and who would try to bash my head in. And rule number three is, if the government tried to do something to me, or confiscate some of my property, or arrest my CEO, or do anything else unjust, I could go to court and have a reasonable chance of winning against the government if my case was just. That is, I want a rule of law, an independent judiciary, and property rights. And where is China in all these three rules? China fails on all three counts. First fail. No one could say anything less than sanctimoniously laudatory about Xi Jinping. Mr. Jack Ma showed him less than 100% admiration and was made to disappear. Some US commentators like Kyle Bass even bet that Mr. Ma would die in prison, but somehow he's back. Why? How? I don't know, and I have no one to ask. Second fail. No one could help Mr. Ma, or he would have been made to disappear too. But third fail, Mr. Ma could not take Mr. Xi Jinping to court because there is no real court in China. They are all under the thumb of the one big dictator whose word is law. If you invest in a place like this, you deserve to have your money taken. In fact, some US wise investment heads even go so far as to say that any money manager who invests his clients' funds in China is probably breaking his fiduciary duty. Come to think of it, the attack on Mr. Ma was not the only one by Mr. Xi Jinping. A few weeks ago, Mr. Xi decided that the homeschooling industry was too dangerous because students may be learning things that would make them too independent. Maybe some of them, the independently schooled ones, would grow up to be more like Mr. Jack Ma. Mr. Xi could not take the chance. So in one day, maybe 1 week, Mr. Xi ordered that most homeschooling operations be shut down or at most curtailed and could deliver only a sliver of the previous business. In 1 week, many billions of market cap disappeared just like that. Share value, employee jobs, bond coverage. Could he do it to another company? He sure could. So why is Charlie Munger not afraid to invest in Alibaba shares? And come to think of it, why was his partner, Warren Buffett, not afraid to invest a decade ago in an electric car company in China? An investment, by the way, which has done very well on paper. Aren't Warren and Charlie afraid of Mr. Xi Jinping's capricious acts? Apparently not. But that's probably because if Mr. Xi decided to screw Munger and Buffett too, like he did to Mr. Ma, the implications would be enormous. Because suddenly, foreign investors would say, if even Warren and Charlie's money is not safe, mine is certainly is not. And then many other investors would start fleeing from China. And this would include large companies with substantial investment in Xi's backyard. And this he would not like, because even if Mr. Xi Jinping is a dictator, he has plenty of domestic oppositions, according to some of my sources. And I don't mean just the old Shanghai gang, led by nonagenarian Jiang Zemin, but many well-connected current billionaires whose view, taken together, have to be considered. Is this what Charlie Munger banking on when he buys shares in Alibaba? Because, there is no rule of law in China, and there are no property rights, and there's no recourse to the courts. So the Alibaba shares Charlie Munger is buying are of a great company, but only on paper, and are selling for a great price, again only on paper, but they are not really an investment, because the paper shares Charlie is getting for his money are not even paper, but toilet paper. If there is no judge that can force Mr. Xi Jinping to leave Charlie Munger shares alone, if Charlie said something unflattering about Mr. Xi. Not that Charlie does or ever would. First, because he, like Warren Buffett, is a smart businessman. But second, because both Charlie and Warren, committed capitalists as they are and have always been deep die-in-the-wool Democrats for years and years. Munger even expressed great admiration to China after China has soldered people shut in their own homes after COVID breakout from Wuhan. And he also said nothing about the Uyghurs or slave laborers or organ harvesting or any of the other many things that others have said. Or is Charlie Munger just doing what Mr. Fink of BlackRock has done? Or Mr. Ray Dalio of Bridgewater? Or Disney's Bob Iger? All of whom said nice things about a country where Mr. Jack Ma would be disappeared without trial because they do lots of business in China and so cannot afford to speak freely? But before you get all virtuous and huffy, what would you say if you were in the position of Buffett and Munger, Dalio, or Fink? Because if you spoke, your shareholders would suffer. Would you still speak up? Would I? Now, this is not a lesson in moral triage, but does point out the kind of issues you must face when you do sleuth out a cheap stock of a great company in a foreign country. So back to your bottom line. Is Baba worth buying? I, of course, make no recommendations. I never do. And in this case, I can't even tell you to go and sleuth the company because it won't help you here either. Even if you spoke Mandarin and Cantonese or Shanghainese in all the dialects, both straight language and inverted language, which is what Chinese comedians use, I'm told. And even if you could travel to China to do local sleuthing, it would still not make your buying Baba shares into an investment. No matter what, it would still remain a speculation because you could not really own the shares, not really. That's because they are not shares, as all Chinese company shares are not shares. They are mere blips on screen in your account. They're only at the pleasure of a dictator who could take them away on a whim, arrest your CEO on a whim, or release him on a whim. So finally, is Baba an exceptional company? Yes. Is the stock exceptionally cheap? Yes again. So is it a good investment? No and no. It is a speculation at best. That's all for today. Let me know what you think of the above. Give it a like, subscribe, and tell all your friends who they're subscribed to. Then go and buy my book. I'll see you next time. And meantime, thank you very much for watching.